Hey guys, looks like we're live. Welcome to another Property and Beers. Properties and beers. So, if you've been here before, welcome back. If it's your first time here, what we do is we usually get out a beverage of choice. I'll discuss tonight's beverage of choice, and we discuss all things property, finance. And today is an election special. We've got an Aussie election on at the moment, and I guess this will serve also as a point in time when we go, great, some of the stuff we've discussed here was right, some of it was changed, but it is going to be interesting. So if you're here, drop me a line, say, hey, how's it going? I'm watching all the comments. I can see everyone on the screen below. So once again, welcome, and we'll get started. So today's is, hold on, I don't know if you can see it, is the Monsuta Alcoholic Mango. Let's give it a go. It's actually quite refreshingly mango. Tastes more like real mango than the fake mango. Gotta be honest with you, I don't mind the fake mango a little bit. But look, it is great. It's 7.3%, so a little bit stronger than the usual beers. About the strength of double the strength of your sort of lights and mids. So, and if you're here watching, welcome. And let's chat about all things properties and finance. So, tonight we're going to cut through some of this political noise to really focus on what matters in investment property, integrity and long term strategy. And here's the thing, right? Here's my thoughts. While politicians debate policies, we're here to discuss principles that withstand any election outcome. Because that's the thing, right? Most people don't understand the current parties are pretty close in their outcomes. It's the minor parties that sort of change the outcomes both on both sides of the policies. And of course, if you've got a differing opinion or the same opinion, write it down in the chat. I'm watching and listening. Now, before I go further into sort of the election side of things, I wanted to chat about my thoughts about the tariffs and what's about to happen. So, my personal beliefs about the tariffs is that they will further strengthen the property market, because when times are uncertain in the stock market, the property market and the gold markets typically are the two growth tools. That's my personal belief into what really happens when it comes to investing in any of these places. So once again, if you're watching, drop me a line. Tell me what you think is going to happen at the election. I'm curious to hear who you think is going to win. Now, I'm not here today to tell you which politician's better, right? I'm here to discuss some of the policies. And if there's something that you feel that, hey, Goro, I want to discuss this with you, I want to add to the chat, feel free to drop it in. So let's look at the current Labor Party's housing policies. They've got a $10 billion Housing Australia Future Fund, which aims to build 30,000 affordable homes over 5 years. Now, it hasn't really got a home off the ground yet. They've also got the expansion of Help to Buy scheme, which originally was started by the previous government, and this is they've expanded the Help to Buy scheme, allowing first home buyers to really purchase homes with government equity. And as I saw on Friendly George's video the other day, now I don't agree with everything he said, but he said that basically he believes that's a great way for the average first time owner occupied to get into housing. Now, if you're an investor, that doesn't apply to you. And I've got to say, the current Help to Buy scheme is pretty hard to get for most people. So I don't believe that's going to be the silver bullet they all hope. Let's talk about the Liberal Party's policies. The Libs propose to invest $5 billion in infrastructure to unlock 500,000 new homes. Their primary mechanism is to, make it easier for things like modular homes, give councils a little bit more of a boot and a little bit of kicking up the backside to allow unlocking infrastructure to really open up those homes and get rid of a lot of their fees they don't have. I was speaking to Michael Sukkar not too long ago, who's the Shadow Minister of Housing, and he mentioned that this was going to be their mechanism. And they also plan for first home buyers to use their superannuation for home deposits. Now, that's both. There's pros and cons to that. That could increase home values. It could you are taking money out of your superannuation. Financial planners have a big bugbear with this. My personal opinion, I don't mind it. Right. By the way, all those stats that I've told you before, they're from the Grattan Institute. You can more than welcome to look it up. These are where these stats and information come from. So where is my beer? There's my beer. It disappeared on me. usually want it on the particular side of the desk. So now let's chat about Greens housing parties. Now, boy, there's a bit of controversy here, right? So the Greens are advocating for the phasing out of negative gearing and capital gains discounts. I think that's complete crap. No, sorry. I promise I won't give my personal opinion. I'll give my opinion afterwards. Yeah. They're also proposing a national rent freeze and the construction of 810,000 public homes over a decade. I don't know what their game plan is to do that. So, with Liberal Labor, look, I think they're both pretty sound policies. My personal opinion is we pay, and I was watching another podcast. You've got Friendly Geordies on one end and Topher Field on the other end, right? Both sides of politics, whoever you listen to. And Topher mentioned we pay about 80%, 83% tax or something like that on our investments, and he goes down the breakdown on how to do it. So on our owner occupier, and he breaks down how that happens. So I don't believe we should be taking tax incentives away. The more we tax landlords, the more it's going to increase rental income. That's how the system works. So less tax, the less rates are there, the less chance there is for a housing crisis in the future. And guys, if you want my opinion on what's going to fix the housing crisis, it's pretty simple. I was on Ticker TV the other day talking about this. You don't need two people living in a 4-bedroom house. Like the rest of the world, we actually have one of the lowest densities around. I think the number one strategy should be the increase of density in each home. We have lower density now than we do 20 years ago. So people are valuing living in a whole house to themselves, and that's partly why the rental crisis is happening. I believe we should be looking at building more co-living houses. That's my honest belief about what I think we should do to help fix the housing crisis. Because, look, I believe it's in our hands. I believe it's in investors like you and I to fix this. The government can only do so much, right? And the government tries their best in some cases. Usually they end up overloading things. For example, what's happened here in Victoria is that we have a shortage of tradies and materials because of the big build. That's bumped up the prices of builds. So, yeah, inadvertently, the reason why builds are higher over here at the moment, and every state's got its own story. You've got Perth, which is going through, a mining boom, and so they can't find tradies there. Adelaide's having a similar situation. New South Wales, everything's just damn expensive over there, right? And Brisbane, once again, similar situation. So we've got the government's basically taking over the top infrastructure items that we need for the average person to live. So of course things are getting more and more expensive. So I wanted to take a step back and actually talk about integrity in investment. One of our core values at Ethical Property Investments is integrity. Now, here's the thing. Integrity isn't just a value. It's our compass to navigating the property market. So I believe integrity should be inherently aligned with real estate. In the past, they've been two alternative worlds, right? Integrity in real estate, what a concept. Not many people really are focused on doing that kind of thing. I believe we need to bring it back. If you make integrity-driven decisions, such as where does my tenant want to live? What kind of experience do they want living in the house? That, for me personally, and my clients, has led to successful investments. And it's regardless of which political party's around. And it's really important that you consider ethically how it's possible for both yourself and the people around you to really do some ethics in property and other things, whatever you invest in, whether it's gold, whether it's etc., whether it's crypto, etc. Figure out how to do it ethically, whatever your version of ethics are. But I think it's time, as successful investors, we look at that as a metric as well, not just the financial outcome. And I think that's really important for us to have a look at, the role of integrity in both investment and, well, I won't say politics, because integrity in politics, I don't know, right? But integrity in investment is up to people like you and I to have a look at fixing. That's my personal belief. Guys, I've seen a couple of you here. Make sure you type in the chat. I'd love to know what your thoughts are on all of these things. Oh, by the way, interest rates, I usually do a small thing on interest rates. I believe interest rates we're going to see about 4 drops this year. of 0.25% each, will end up by the end of this year potentially at 1% lower than where we are right now. That's what my belief is. We might say the equivalent of 2 drops in the next one. I'm not sure about that yet, but definitely in the next one, due to all this tension from the tariffs, we will definitely see at least 1 drop. I'm 99.99999% certain of that. The reason why they didn't do it before, even though a snap meeting has been called, is that it will influence the election too much. So that's my belief. It's not bad, actually. It gets addictive. So here's the thing. I want to give an example of Melbourne. Now, if you were focused on the short term in Melbourne and Victoria, you'd be losing. You'd actually lose money. I got a call from a friend going, "Hey, I've lost money on my unit. What do I do?" I'm like, "You're focused on the short term. You've got to focus on the long term." So what happens with property? It's a long game, right? Now we're now seeing the Melbourne property rebound. In fact, over the last 2 to 3 months, it's had the highest growth in the country, regardless of who's in power. That's a huge thing. So the property market is more resilient than who's in power as an overall situation. And here's the thing: both major party leaders are actually property investors themselves. Like, there's a bipartisan belief in real estate's value, right? Now, here, regardless of what you think, on average, we have historical yield, historical data showing about 6% growth on average across most capital cities in Australia. And there are strategies to maintain integrity and profitability amongst the political shifts. And regardless of who wins the election, Labor, Liberal, I almost, from a property point of view, don't really care. Of course, I care from a business point of view and a few of the other things. But from a property point of view and long-term holding of the property, I don't care who wins, because both of the leaders are property investors. So, guys, if you've got any questions, let me know. I've been going on for a while. And look, here's my thing. Here's my, summary of sort of my rant today. Stay informed, stay principled, and remember, integrity is your greatest asset in property investment. Now, who's next? Now, by the way, we ran a huge webinar, and I'll post some videos about this today. We ran a massive webinar over on Tuesday. We had the highest shop rate ever. It was the clash of the titans, clash of the property titans. NDI special disability accommodation versus co-living strategies. Now, if you wanted to get a replay or recording of that, drop a line in the chat box. Definitely happy to send you a copy of that. No issues whatsoever. We had quite a few people shop, and it was a great webinar. We went for half an hour longer than we'd scheduled, right? Because I was there adding as much content as possible. Amit, what do I think the outlook for interest rates is? Amit, by the way, I love what you do in property. Thank you for doing such a good job with adding so much value to people. My honest belief, and I said this just before, you may not have been on there, was that I believe we'll have the equivalent of 1 whole percentage point cutoff across 4 different rate drops. Whether the next one is 1 or 2 rate drops, I'm not sure, but I'm 99.9999% sure the next RBA meeting, which is going to be held just after the election, will have a 1 rate drop in it at 0.25 at the very least. In total, we're probably due to drop by another percentage point, which will have the effect in the short term. Now, I remember I said to focus on property in the long term. My personal belief is areas that are traditionally haven't grown over the last cycle, and other areas that have artificially grown over the last cycle will have a reverse swap, and we'll get back to status quo, which is, typically your Melbourne, Sydney, and Sydney being your highest, Melbourne and Brisbane sort of being on par, and Perth and Adelaide being lower. At the moment, I believe Perth and Adelaide are kind of a little bit overpriced for where they are. It doesn't mean they'll go down. It just means that the Melbourne market will come up. That's my belief. Hopefully that's answered the question. Now, actually, that brings me up to an interesting point. I need another beer for this. So, and I'm going to look up some stats before I go through. Just bear with me. Okay. So, any other questions? Yeah, I just saw your comment. I think Melbourne is ready to go with the rate cuts. We're seeing the grass shoots happen over the last 2 to 3 months. We've had the highest growth in the country happen in Melbourne. I really believe that maybe accepting certain pockets in Melbourne that I don't necessarily like. I'm not a fan of the outer west of Melbourne, but there are other pockets in there, and I'm not a fan of the outer north of Melbourne either. So if you're looking at the outer suburbs, I think they may not grow, but the one or two suburbs in is where I believe the growth will truly occur. So, actually, I get this question a lot, and I wanted to raise it, right? I get the question a lot, Goro, what's better, cash flow or capital growth? Honestly, most of the time I'm like, hey, why not both? Like the girl on the taco ad. So, I like to say that you don't need $1 million salary to build wealth, but you do need to pick the right strategy for you. If you want to quit your job faster or build generational wealth slowly, you need to figure out what your balance is of cash flow and capital growth, because they're two totally different games. And here's the thing: most people really do mix them up, because we have that conversation a lot with people, where we're debating, hey, is capital growth or cash flow going to be the best thing? And I think, maybe on next week's Property MBAs, I cover this a little bit more. But let's define it, right? Cash flow is your regular income from rental properties. Now, typically these are, high yield. These properties tend to be a little bit lower growth in commercial in nature. Your capital growth is your long-term increase in property value, offer you lower yields. And part of what I covered on the webinar that I did on Tuesday is figure out what your version of balance is. If you're in a stage of life where you want just cash flow, capital growth is a bonus for you, then check out, sort of your NDIS specialist disability accommodation stuff. If you want capital growth, then definitely look at the one-step in strategy. I actually like a bit of a balance. Some of our co-livings that we're building actually get regular capital growth. We figured out the strategy to get that regular capital growth, as well as get you a cash flow where it's cash flow positive. Yes, it's not financial freedom, $100,000 a year cash flow positive, but it still allows you to breathe, and that's the most important thing. It still puts more money in your pocket than it takes out. And that's kind of important in the current scenario, where it'll only get better with the interest rate drops that we were talking about just a little bit earlier. Now, there are a lot of deep dives I can go with this. But I think it's important to figure out what kind of investor you are. If you're looking to retire really soon, you probably want to have a look at, your cash flow strategies. If you're looking to retire 40 years down the track, cash flow is great, but right now, build your wealth, right? And the other thing is, with some high yield, high cash flow projects, and it depends on everything, there is a long lag time to initially get it. But once you get it, it's great. And also there's that little level of uncertainty. With higher risk, there are higher rewards. Now, if you value stability, there are methods to do it. And I think you should do it as close to traditional real estate as possible. There are methods in co-livings you can actually have really similar to traditional real estate, but also get that sort of co-living income out there. And it really depends on your personal risk profile. And I believe it's, here's the thing. Here's my personal belief. This isn't about chasing fast money. It's about building a life. And for some of you, it's a legacy that reflects on who you are. That's why I believe you should look at investing with integrity. By the way, if you are looking at, hey, Goro, you're providing a lot of information. I'm not sure what's right for me. If I've got any, I've got more and more questions, feel free to drop me a line as well. And if you want to watch the webinar I was talking about earlier, definitely check that out. But here's what I will leave you with, right? Cash flow or capital growth. It's not a one-size-fits-all game. It's a question of, values, goals, and really season of life. And it's up to you to figure out where you are on your own season in life. We're happy to help you along your journey. That's my belief. And that's kind of why I do these properties and videos. Thanks, guys. Have a great day. Looks like there's no more questions. I've been going on for a while today. Cheers. Have a great Friday and a great weekend.